Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, 5 Ways a Mobile Platform Can Change How You Work. A couple of quick housekeeping slides before we get started. Remember to dial in using your phone for best audio quality. After you call the phone number on the screen, a moderator will prompt you to enter our webinar ID followed by the pound sign. Your phone lines are muted for this webinar, and use the ribbon on the bottom of your screen to chat us or ask questions throughout the webinar. Use the chat option if you have questions about audio or visual aspects. Use the Q&A function to ask us questions that we will answer at the end of the webinar if we have time. If we do not get to your question, we'll follow up with you after this webinar. Now introducing our speakers. First, we have Sam Chapin from Dude Solutions. Sam has been an applications engineer with Dude Solutions for over 3 years, working with government organizations to help identify operational needs and solve them using technology, specializing in work and asset management and community development operations. She is NC Stormwater BMP Maintenance and Inspection Certified and presents at industry events regularly. Next, we have Burke Robertson. Burke is the Public Works Director for the City of Graham, North Carolina, where he's been working for 12 years. He oversees the Sanitation Department, Streets and Highways Department, Property Maintenance Department, and the City Garage. And finally, we have Eric Garcia. Eric is the Manager of Operations for the Camarasa Water District. He manages the operation and maintenance of the physical infrastructure of the district's water system, directs GIS-based preventive maintenance program, and oversees capital improvement projects. And now I'll pass it over to Sam to go through our agenda.
Awesome. So let's briefly review the agenda for today. We'll cover 5 ways a mobile platform can change how you work. Part 1 will be productivity. Part 2, historical data. 3, service commitment. 4, compliance and safety. And finally, we'll wrap up with budget and benefits. So after the webinar today, we will have a Q&A session. So as questions come up, feel free to chat them through the Zoom chat feature, and we will address them towards the end. So just to kick the webinar off, tell you guys a little bit about me. I've been working with government organizations for almost 4 years, and I speak to about 5 organizations each day. Majority of them struggle to get the funding and resources they need to optimize operations for their departments. Not really because the work's not getting done, but because they aren't able to show why they need it. So today we'll talk about how a mobile platform can help in many areas of your operations. First things first, though, really you kind of have to think, what are you fighting for right now? What will really take your operations to the next level? What's really driving you in your department? You have to define that first for your department. Is it more staff to help with projects you have coming up? Maybe it's a new piece of equipment like a street sweeper or a new garbage truck. Or maybe for our fire department, they need new turnout gear. Or for streets or public works, getting to those deferred road projects. Whatever that driver is, once we define it, you can start building a business case for why you need it. So building a business case can be simple. Really, there's 3 steps to it. First, assessing your current needs. So what do we own? What condition is it in? How many do we have? What impact does that make on our community and our operations? Once we've done that assessment, we can then prioritize most critical to least important. Once we've done that prioritization, we can start building out a plan, understanding and defining what funding and resources will we need to go out and execute on that. So in this case, data is going to be key. Defining key metrics that support the business needs you're asking for. Example, we need a new piece of equipment. Ability to show how many hours or miles you've put on the current one, or the total number of breakdowns, the money that's been invested so far, or how much does it cost to replace it. A lot of times when speaking with government organizations, they say, hey, how do we know if our data is accurate? We all know that garbage in equals garbage out, so we need a good, consistent way to start collecting some of that information. So that's where moving to a mobile platform can help collect consistently accurate data in the field. Even though about 77% of Americans own smartphones, a majority of organizations still use pen and paper as their primary record keeping. Many of these organizations have viewed going mobile as a challenge, but really it can be an opportunity. Going mobile can help save money, it can help save time, and it can help save resources. Now, I want to share a couple stories from two of our panelists that we have on with us today, Burke and Eric, who Cameron had introduced at the beginning, to really understand why they decided to move to a mobile platform and what they were looking for when they decided to make that change. So Burke, if you don't mind, if you can tell us a little bit about why your community decided to go to a mobile platform.
Well, when I moved to the street superintendent's position in 2012, the person I replaced didn't even have a computer in his office. Everything was done pencil and paper. What records we had were either non-existent or poor. So I had to do a lot of figuring out as we went along. So that started myself and the public works director at that time to have a conversation about, a work order system. But our immediate thing that immediately drove us was our need to meet compliance with the federal sign requirements for retro reflectivity. And that's how we started down the road that we started on.
Very good. And Eric, I know we've talked a few times about what sort of criteria you guys were looking for in a mobile platform when you first started to make that change, and why that was critical to the operations there at Camarosa Water District. Do you mind telling the group a little bit about the criteria that you defined for your organization and why that was important?
Sure. Yeah. So I came in from a different industry, knowing very little about the water industry. And first question I asked was where do we want to go? And the overall response was we need to become more proactive as opposed to reactive. So that led us down a long path of creating a preventive maintenance program. And we quickly realized in order to make that program a reality, we needed to have a current state logbook historical record of what's been happened in the past and so we can schedule what needs to happen in the future. So that led to requirements for a mobile platform, and specifically we had 5 areas that were key emphasis items. One is I was pretty adamant it had to be end user focused, i.e. it had to be field friendly, because without good information coming in, it's garbage in, garbage out. 2, one of the technical requirements we had to be an open API architecture for easy integration with other systems. 3 had to have a time and scheduling and reporting capability. And then lastly, it had to be a GIS-centric platform. And of course, all of that was balanced with cost. So those were our requirements coming in.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Eric. I think when it comes to mobile technology in general, there's going to be different individuals who are impacted by the data that's collected through a platform. So depending on what level that person is within your organization, so on the screen you guys can see sort of a standard org chart. It's not exactly what your district may have or your organization may have. But either way, at the top, this is more of like a strategic understanding of the business. So making those decisions about growing the organization, justifying budget, making sure that we're compliant. At each of these levels, the data is going to affect them differently. So to help make those strategic decisions, they have the information they need. When you think about management, so actual frontline managers within a community, understanding the resource allocation, being able to start to predict what may happen in the future, and then obviously making sure that the right people are in the right place at the right time. And then finally, last but not least, for sure, our field operators or folks who work out in the community to make things better every day, being able to have access to real-time maintenance history, being able to use something that's easy, and also optimize their efficiency. So being able to work from anywhere and have the ability to work autonomously, without having to come back and forth to the office throughout the day. So a lot of these points, again, we're going to cover. These, again, are the 5 key points we really want you guys to take away from the webinar today. We'd like you to consider how implementing a mobile platform could really change your operations. But before we dive into these 5 areas, our focus areas for today, we'd love to learn a little bit about you, the audience, just to understand where you're currently at. So Cameron's going to share a poll with you guys right now, and she'll go through and read those out to you. And once we've received information from you guys, I'll recap that.
Yeah, so the poll you should be seeing on your screen right now says, what best explains your current process? Pen and paper, some devices but not using them for tracking and reporting, or using smartphones and tablets in the field for tracking and reporting. We'll give you a minute to answer that question, and then Sam will go over the results.
Awesome. So we did get final results back. So it looks like about 2/3 of the group today are using smartphones to some degree. Percentage of that 2/3 is have smartphones but not necessarily using them for any tracking or reporting. We have a percentage as well that's still on pen and paper. So that's great to understand you guys, so we can kind of gear today's webinar to where you guys are currently at in that journey. All right, so the first key takeaway is going to be enhancing productivity. That's really the first way to help change the way you work. And I want to jump into a little bit about being proactive. And we all want to be proactive. It does take a lot of discipline to implement a solid PM program. Mobile technology can certainly help with the implementation of that by tracking and reporting the efficiencies gained within implementing that system. Additional efficiencies obviously can be gained as well, so no longer waiting for the next work assignment to get out to our field crews, no more coming back and forth to the office, but also being able to increase some communication across our departments simply by implementing mobile devices. There was a quote from the American City and County June issue. If you guys read through that, it was from the Public Works and Environmental Services Director, James Patterson. He told the participants there's a significant opportunity to do better. He said a problem that costs $1 to prevent could cost $7 to fix, or worse yet, $70 to rebuild after a failure. Smartening the infrastructure could pay tremendous dividends, as analytics would help guide the county to deal with problems before they become serious problems. So I wanted to share that with you guys. I thought that was really impactful, speaking to getting a preventative program in place. Eric, actually with Camarosa Water District, they recently completed a study that showed how effective putting a PM program in place was for their district. And Eric, I was hoping maybe you could share a little bit about that study and what your findings were.
Sure, yeah, we came up with fairly similar numbers. You'll see on this next slide with that 7-to-1 ratio. We actually it was about a 3.12, I believe, ratio to fix something as opposed to fix it preventively. But what's interesting is, now this program took about 1.5 years to develop, about 6 months to develop, and about 1 year to get full data, right? So 6 months of implementation, and then 1 year afterwards we have data to speak of. But we were able to collect data not only on how much work we're being done, but how much time we're being invested and we're put into that PM plan. But the big takeaway here is it took us a relatively small investment of our time and a fairly small investment of our financial resources, but the payouts are pretty high. So you can see there for PM, it took us about 10% of our time last fiscal year and about 13% of our budget. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see what that translates into in financial savings. So we looked at about 16 different data points where we failed to do PM, and that cost us about $164,000, which it would have cost us about $65,000. I'm sorry, it cost us about $285,000 to prepare those items, but it would have cost us about $65,000 to do that PM. So if you work the math backwards, you get a ratio of about 3.12. And again, that's probably on the conservative side. Where the good news is, though, where we did do the PM, which we invested about 300, just shy of 350. If you apply that ratio, you get about a little over $1 million. So those numbers kind of speak for themselves on that slide right there. So overall, very successful.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Eric. I know from a productivity standpoint, being able to manage workload, there's a lot of moving parts in every organization, so having a centralized database of all those operations is critical. Updates are communicated across the organization and everybody's in the loop, so having a real-time pulse in the field can really help in many ways. Bert, we had talked before the webinar today a little bit about some of the productivity gains that you saw when implementing a program. You had told the group earlier that initially you brought on a mobile platform for signage, but ultimately you've kind of transformed that into other operations for sanitation and some of your streets division. Do you mind telling us a little bit about what sort of gains you saw after implementing the platform?
Yeah, we started into it, like I say, for just signs, but we decided we'd implement it across Public Works. And the first department that showed, tremendous savings was our sanitation department, and particularly in yard waste collection, where we had a knuckle boom truck that picked up large piles and a rear loader that'd go around and pick up cans of grass clippings and stuff like that. And if you'd look at the breadcrumbs when we started running our beta testing, that both trucks went down every road every week, and we set it up to where the automated drivers could report, and the rear loader driver could report piles that needed to be got by the knuckle boom truck. And slowly, by the end of that 5-day beta test, the fuel savings was significant, because he was only going, instead of going down every road, he was only going down about 15 or 20% of the road every week. Between fuel and wear and tear on the truck, when we saved more than it was costing us for the software program.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Burke. I have a similar story too. You mentioned being able to go and kind of pinpoint those locations for bulk item pickups. City of Asheboro, that we actually have a case study out with them. They've had a mobile platform implemented for a few years, and from using a mobile platform, they were able to see 68% cost savings in fuel, vehicle maintenance, and labor hours. So just to share that story with you, you can see underneath that quote, there's a link to our full case study if you guys want to read a little bit more about it. But that wraps up our productivity section. I wanted to go ahead and jump into historical data. That's the second way mobile can change the way you work. So at some point, we'll all have to deal with employees that retire or move on to other opportunities, and that may be some of the folks today on the phone call. There has to be a place where that information goes. Where does that knowledge go? We don't want it to go out the door and lose that institutional knowledge. And this is a real fear for a lot of organizations out there. What happens when you have someone that's been there for 35 years and they take all that information with them? Burke was telling us a little bit about some of the sign information, being able to keep 4 or 5 years worth of data in the program. Burke, how has that helped you guys, from a operations standpoint, being able to retain those types of records? Where do you see the biggest benefits there?
When it comes time to go around and do the testing of the retro-reflective, instead of trying to sort through and figure out where to go, you can go to a year's time period that signs were installed, turn that on, and you know exactly what signs are due for an inspection. When you have vandalism, theft, or wreck, like a street name sign, you can look on a map, but if you don't remember which side of the road the street name sign was on, you won't know what the block numbers were. And we took pictures of all the street signs as we put them up. So you just simply go to that intersection, you pull the sign up, you pull the picture up, and you know exactly what block number. And to make sure that the sign doesn't get misspelled, everything's right there for you. And it makes, instead of having to go out, figure it out, come back, make a sign, go back out, put it back up, it greatly simplifies the process.
Very good. I have a quote actually for Eric from your district when we did a case study with you guys. This kind of stood out to me when I was piecing everything together to share with the group. And you had said, with multiple employees nearing retirement and no real way to keep documentation all in one place for everyone to see, knowledge retention was becoming a concern. So again, full case study you guys can access through that link under the quote. Jumping into the next thing, as far as bringing on new people, onboarding new staff, think about that. Coming into an organization, not having any information about what's happened, before I started. It can be like drinking from a water hose or fire hose. And by keeping a centralized system, that onboarding process can be a lot simpler. It can also quicken the speed up of getting someone up and running, which can also save us time and money. So Eric was telling us before the webinar, I thought they had recently hired one new employee, but they've had two actually since they've had a mobile platform. Eric, how does this having a system in place change the onboarding process for those individuals?
Yeah, and actually we've actually hired more, but I'll use two specific examples with the two new employees we've had. So actually this happened just yesterday. So and before I go into that, a lot of work has been put in from multiple departments to create a database structure and architecture that allow that to happen. So it's not something that happens easy, but the results are huge, because when we had two new employees, they need to access critical information, and we have over 8,000 service connections in our district. That's over 8,000 valves, 200 miles of piping. So there's just a lot of stuff out there, over 8,000 meters. Well, just the other day, we have some meters that are in some pretty rural locations, and I almost had tears, not quite literally, but tears of pride come out of my eyes when they came back and say, hey, we're using this mobile platform to access the GIS to find one of the meters that are just impossible to find. They're out in the middle of a field, and we've actually geotagged them all with survey grade GPS coordinates, and all that information is available in the field to the staff at all times. That's just one example. Another example is we've also done that with our as-builts. So when we have our crews out there working on a leak, or whatever the case may be, they have access to all the engineering drawings that are all cross-linked to specific piping and specific valving, and it's all geolocated with their phone. So the new employees have been finding that incredibly valuable, because we have employees that have been here as short as 2 weeks to 35 years. So as great as the 35-year employee is, we need to find a way to transfer all that knowledge and store it. And until they develop USBs to hook up to people's brains, this is kind of the next best thing. And so this allows us a systematic process to capture that knowledge and to share it with new hires.
Awesome. And just to give another example, so to give you guys a visual, imagine going out in the field and having all that information at your fingertips. No need to lug out any map books anymore. We can kind of put those to the wayside and start carrying our smartphones and tablets out there. But ultimately having the resources we need from anywhere, really. So in this example, this water main break example, the ability to view the location of the break, when's the last time we had one, how many clamps have we put on it, is it time to replace? So how do we know this information today? What does that look like for your organization? If we had a new employee come in to our organization and start working, how quickly can we get them up and running? So this kind of ties back to the different levels of the organization and why they care. So from a field operator standpoint, we're looking at wanting to use this, or they care because mobile's simple. It saves them time. They've got the real-time maintenance history, and it also helps increase their efficiency. And Eric, I think you had another point you wanted to add in here, so I'll let you speak there as well.
Yeah, sure. One of the things to build on that, so there's two parts of it. One is to be able to share the information so that the field crews can use it in real time. But the other thing that we found very useful is it allows us on the back end, it allows easy information from the field crews into the management and other staff, particularly the data management, the GIS staff, which allows for post-processing and post-analysis. So because one iteration, one failure at one point doesn't really tell you much, but when you have tens or hundreds of these across a map, it paints a different picture. And at the end of the day, that is what really allows us, those pictures that are painted really allow us to make better decisions holistically across the district, primarily for budgeting. An example I can give today is, we did this with all our hydrants, and I can strategically come up with a game plan to where we're going to fix our hydrants that maybe they're not out of commission, but they just need a little touch up like the paint. Well, that requires the budgeting to do that. So it's been very useful in both directions, not just pushing information out to the field.
And I think Burke has something in line with that as well. Burke, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it enables you to make corrections to the existing data. For example, we use a third party to collect our GIS data for our GIS layer. And when they come to areas that there were creative engineering, they just took their best guess as to where the water line went, where the sewer line went, where the storm drain went. And sometimes the data they give you is worse than no data at all, because you make assumptions based off of it. This gives you the ability to record it, collect it, record the position of it, and then get it corrected in the GIS layer so future people know.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. Thank you guys for sharing that insight with the group. I want to go ahead and shift over into the third key takeaway, which is going to be community service or our service commitment. I wanted to start with a quick quote. I don't know if any of you guys know who Grace Murray Hopper is. She actually joined the U.S. Navy during World War II and was assigned to the program, the Mark I computer. She continued to work in computing after the war, leading the team that created the first computer language compiler. So she was truly a visionary, and I think this says a lot. It speaks to sort of challenging status quo and what we do every day, and I think that kind of goes in line with the service that we provide our communities and continuing to take it to the next level. So mobile platforms can help improve communication, keeping everybody on the same page. When a citizen calls in, we're able to respond with real-time information we collect from the field. And this helps keep those phone calls at minimum, and we're able to work quicker and more effectively. So in this example, think about your organization. What's the current process for putting in a service request? Whether it be for parks, whether it be for facilities, whether it be for water and sewer operations. How many steps and how many people are involved in that? Once it's resolved, where does the documentation go, and are we able to easily pull that up later if we need it in the future? So a lot of us out there, I'm sure, have defined service levels or turnaround times, how we want to meet the expectations of our community based on the type of request that it may be. So really here, how do we improve it? How do we get better at doing that if we aren't tracking what we manage? So Burke, I know we talked about you guys justifying some fees and rates that you guys set for your services. Do you mind telling us a little bit about how you guys were able to do that through reports?
Yeah, we was able to take and we use what's called a can not out so that drivers can hit that as they drive by. It helps you with things like actual, so you can take an average of what your weight per can is to help gauge what your sanitation fee needs to be like to match your tipping fees at the landfill. You also use it to help save fuel. Very beneficial to us because we're a small town and everybody knows the mayor. And they'll forgot to put their trash can out, then they'll call the mayor. Well, they got every can in the neighborhood but mine. And through this system, we were able to document and show, and even the repeat offenders would take a picture of it to show we were in front of your house at this time, at this date, and your can is nowhere to be seen. By doing so, it has helped reduced the amount of times we've got to go back to the other side of town to get a can that was not there just because they called a political leader.
Very good. And I'm sure a lot of us deal with some similar situations, whether it be in sanitation or other departments within our government organizations. So really, I just pulled up a KPI chart, so key performance indicators. Once we've defined what metrics are really going to gauge our success, we can start managing that. As we do after a week or after a month, we can go back to these numbers and we can see, are they changing? If they're not, what can we do on our end to make those changes? What can we implement? What types of programs will be important for us to start meeting those goals or those benchmarks that we set for ourselves? And having numbers and data in general, we can share that with our councils, with our commissioners to show what we've done, but also have the data that we need to make changes, get the funding that we need or the projects that we need to tackle. So that sort of leads into our compliance and safety. The fourth way mobile can change the way you work. So I've got two examples up on the screen. Obviously, within government, minimizing risk is very important for all organizations. So doing regular inspections, those are put in place to make sure that assets are functioning properly and to prevent potential safety issues. The two examples up on the screen, site inspections and playground safety inspections, are two pretty important ones. Obviously, mobile devices can help collect the data needed to protect your organization from risk and liability, whether it's a compliance form that needs to be filled out or GPS location to show when, where, and how fast our vehicles may have been going. So Burke had talked a little bit about breadcrumbs earlier, and I actually have a visual so he can share a little bit more about that. Burke, tell us a little bit about how do you use this type of technology? So having a mobile device in a vehicle that says, hey, this is where it's at, this is how fast it's going, what has that done for you?
Yeah, you get residents that call in, your trash truck was flying down my road. It gives you the ability to go look and see, is it a perception issue or do we really have a speed problem with some of our drivers? We got old folks in town that I think the highlight of their day is watching their trash can be dumped, and they'll call you, are you going to get my trash today? You're able to look up and say, yes, ma'am, the trash truck is 2 blocks away. It should be there in X amount of time. And it really helps. It really helps in those two areas a bunch.
Yeah, I know in some of the communities that we work with, being able to see how fast they were going, if they say, hey, they were speeding through our neighborhood. I think you had shared too that this has helped kind of cover yourselves and sort of a liability side of things. Is that right, Burke? Have you guys?
Yeah, it also keeps your drivers honest. They don't drive as fast because they know you can see them, and they also won't go and hang out at McDonald's for 35 or 40 minutes when they're supposed to be out on a route somewhere.
Absolutely. I think even the park example that I had given earlier, so going out and doing like playground inspections. I know one of our clients who we did a case study with, Spalding County, Georgia, their park superintendent, TJ Emberger, this is one of the quotes that he had told us and why moving to a mobile platform was important to them. And I'll just read it out for the group. The increase in accountability by being able to track progress on inspections and work being done for those on playgrounds is 20-fold. It really helps limit our liability, and to me, that's worth $1 million. So there's a lot of different unique ways you guys can leverage this type of technology to help just in your day-to-day operations and some of the compliance and safety issues that you guys have to deal with as well. So since we've gotten to sort of the fourth bullet point, I wanted to sort of recap what we've talked about so far. So we talked a little bit about increasing productivity, historical data to help support business continuity, continuing improving our service commitment, and then we just talked a little bit about compliance and safety. So the fifth key way or key takeaway we want you guys to have with you is going to be the budget benefits, which I know we've sort of talked about a little bit throughout. But I wanted to start a little bit with Eric. Kind of stemming from that study, he was able to come up with these metrics through the information he was able to report on through having mobile technology. Eric, do you mind sharing a little bit about what results you saw, what changes you saw, and what you did with the savings?
Sure. So again, this is kind of a recap of the numbers that we're talking about before, but I got to really harp in on the fact that if we wouldn't have had the mobile platform, we would have not been able to collect this data in the first place. So we wouldn't have even been able to make an assessment. But with that money, what we essentially do is we reinvest that back in our district. It really comes back down to we're able to be much more efficient and do more work with the same amount of staff that we had. And kind of management mantra 101, right, is whatever you track is what gets the attention. It becomes the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. So really, it's allowed, given us a tool to communicate with the general manager and our decision makers and our board, where we need to implement our resources of time, money, and people, and how we best can accomplish that. So the numbers kind of speak for themselves. Again, it doesn't take a lot of time and investment in time and or money to get very big results, but in a nutshell, we've been able to do almost 40% more work than we would have if we hadn't had that, because it's just of how we can organize our staff and organize our time.
Awesome, Eric. So from a funding perspective, or understanding that you saved $1 million, what were you guys able to do with those funds, or what have you done with them?
Well, primarily it's been reinvested back into the district. It allows us to keep our rates low. We are one of the lowest rates in the county, and it allows us to focus our energy on other projects, long-term projects that the district needs. I could go into several specific examples, but in the end, it preserves our infrastructure for a much longer period of time, which is then translated to our customer base and our constituents, and the rates stay low. That's really what it comes down to.
Awesome. I think one of the things too, from a data perspective or being able to gather results, we can remove uncertainty. So the lack of information can cause leadership to have maybe a foggy view of what your actual needs are. There's actually a study done that showed that the brain tends to focus on missing data because it thinks it must be really important since we're searching for it and we can't move on without it. So if we can take that uncertainty away by collecting the data that you need using mobile devices or other techniques, have the information you need that's accurate, it can really help build trust and remove that uncertainty from those conversations. So when it comes time to have those budget conversations, we have the data to make those decisions. So at the end of the day, really having the data that you need, having accurate, good information can lead to making better decisions and being better stewards of public funds. It provides a more accurate way to forecast our needs, our replacements and repairs, and ultimately just better planning for the future for different resources that we may require, and maybe getting the right people in place for certain jobs. Anything else, Burke or Eric, you guys would add from a budgeting perspective? What's really been a highlight for your communities?
Totally on the budgeting perspective per se, but really it just kind of captures kind of the essence of what the mole platform is, right? The mole platform really is not, it's not the cure-all, end-all, be-all. There's still a lot of management things that you have to do, and nothing will replace good leadership and good management. It's a cultural thing. It's a people thing. However, but from our perspective, I'd say it's probably one of the most powerful tools to get us what we need from a management and budgeting perspective, and for the long-term efficiency of our district, the long-term maintenance of our system. So, as long as you remember it's a tool, and the tool is only as good as the people using it. And one of the advantages that it's brought is it's really kind of a tool that allows us to paint our own canvas, and it's malleable to our needs. So that's just been huge and critical. And I have yet to find something that has delivered the same with the same results.
And we were able to use this to help supplement our street resurfacing program, our street surveys of street conditions, through tracking potholes and utility patches and other things, to show the importance of increasing funding in street resurfacing. And we have, in the last 5 years, we have gotten our resurfacing budget more than doubled.
Oh, and that actually brings up a good point for me too. Kind of along the same notes. Going back to the tool example that I was referring to earlier, one of the things it allowed us to do is because we can track our time, it allows us to get align our estimates with our staffing levels to what we think is appropriate, right? Because if we're tracking how much time we're spending on things and what things take, in order to get certain amount done, we're able to conclusively say to our general manager and/or our board, this is a staffing level that would be appropriate to get those things done that you want to get done. So on that perspective, it's budgeting for people has been very useful.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate both you, Eric and Bert, for sharing those stories with the group. That concludes sort of the five ways mobile can help change the way you work. We do have a couple additional things we just wanted to mention, and also just get kind of a pulse from you guys on what to do next. So when we talk about mobile, a lot of today's focus has been work and asset management, but also remember, from a forecasting standpoint, we do offer a few other areas of expertise. So capital forecasting for those 5, 10, 15, 30-year replacement cycles, community development for permitting, inspections, code violations, things of that nature. We've got energy management to help identify maybe some low-hanging fruit for your operations, utilizing online billing and things like that. So just wanted to highlight those areas. And as we transition into the Q&A, just a reminder, guys, we have our annual Dude University Conference. This year it'll be May 5th through the 8th. In Raleigh, North Carolina. Great opportunity to network with other government organizations using mobile platforms and CMMS systems to track their operations. We'll have guest speakers and roundtable discussions that'll hit on a lot of the hot topics in the government industry. So if you're interested, you guys can go to university2019.com. And just as we conclude today, Cameron's going to put up the last poll just to get a little feedback from you guys. Let us know if there's anything else we can provide you.
Yeah, so right before we get to questions, we just wanted to get a pulse from you guys to see if you wanted any additional information on our work and asset management, which, like Sam said, is a lot of what we discussed today, our capital forecasting, our community development, our energy management, Dude University, or additional mobility content that we can send you guys similar to things that we talked about today. So I'll leave that up for about 30 more seconds. All right, and as those answers come in, just a final reminder, if you have any questions before we get to the question and answer session, on the bottom of your screen, there should be a bar that has a Q&A, and just enter them into there. All right, so shutting that poll down. Thank you for answering. And moving on to the questions section. So Burke and Eric, I think this is probably best answered by you guys. Someone asked, they said that their team isn't currently using mobile devices and they have some people that are more comfortable using them than others. So how did you get buy-in from your entire team, especially those that were hesitant at first?
Yeah, I can answer some of that. So this is Eric from Camarosa. One of the simple answer is you bring them along in the process. I was very adamant that this had to be a very field-friendly application. In fact, I looked at least a dozen other softwares, and you know, they all have their values, and you know, some are better than others. But bringing the field crews in was probably one of the most important things you can have, because quite frankly, if they don't like it, if it's very difficult to use, you're not going to get the data you want, or it's going to be extremely painful to do that. So you have to remember, any kind of technological improvement you make in any organization it's as much as a people and a cultural and a behavioral change than it is a technological change, because the greatest technology in the world does you little if people won't use it. So my advice and my lessons learned, I think one of the things you did well was bringing people in, the end state users, bringing them in early, bringing them often, getting their feedback, and providing that feedback back to any developer.
Yeah, I concur with that. I mean, that's my saying is, you know, if you want something to succeed, you got to involve the end users in the beginning, because if you hand them something and they think it's a piece of crap, it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy on their end. But yeah, it went well. But another thing that helps is the end user with this. It's really easy to use. It's not nothing really complicated. If you can operate a smartphone on a daily basis, you have no problem with this system. And everybody has a smartphone nowadays.
Yeah, thank you guys for both providing answers for that one. Burke, I think this is addressed to you. So when you were tracking vehicles, when you were discussing tracking your vehicles, how much kickback was given, and how did you deal with that from a manager's perspective?
We had very little, because I explained to them, like I said, we brought them in the beginning, and I explained it to them, this is as much to protect you as it is to track you. You know, because the way it worked in the past is somebody call up, trash truck flying in the neighborhood, and you go get on somebody's butt because you thought they were flying in the neighborhood. Now you can say, hey, look, no, he was running 25 and a 35. He was 10 miles an hour under the speed limit. You know, and once they started seeing things like that, that it was a benefit to them. If you're doing your job and doing it correctly, the tracking you only protects you.
Definitely. And Eric, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and again, it goes back to this is any technology and any change is a behavioral change, right? Really, it comes down to leadership and establishing trust. If your staff trusts management and trust leadership, generally that's going to be much better received. And you know, I was in a very position to have a great staff that's able to do that. So, you know, for me, I think the point where I realized that we had made the right choice is I had an individual who is not particularly fond of technology, and he's a great worker though. And when we showed him what it could do, and we showed him how much time we'll save, because you know, in this example, we have to take photographs of all of our we call it fat, oils, and grease inspections for a sewer line. You know, it used to take him 30, 45 minutes every time he would do this just to load a photograph, because it was take a picture, download it to here, download it to there. And I started like, no, look, man, you just take this picture, you point, you shoot, you're done. It was like he had discovered fire. So again, it all comes down to the management problem and the leader and how you handle that from a leadership perspective.
One more question. So we had a question about the workload, about getting a new software solution up and running. What did you guys do to ensure success?
Well, from our ends, it was a lot of planning. We were pretty well prepared when we had our planning session. So we had a very clear plan of what we wanted to accomplish it, how we wanted to accomplish it. And I did a lot of research on what the program can't do, what it couldn't do, how to do that. You know, that took a lot of coordination with a lot of different people. So like anything else, the more you plan, the better off you're going to be, but don't expect things to go as planned. So plan well, then be ready to call the audible on game day. So that for us, it really came down to that.
Yeah, that's what we done. We, we spoke with y'all, and we figured out what the system would do, wouldn't do. Then we brought the end users in and had discussion with them. What can we do with this? This is what we can do, what we can't do. What can we do to make your life easier? And then we implemented everything. We run beta testing for 1 week, and then we went live after 5 days of beta testing, let everybody play with it, and it's been absolutely wonderful. We've had some hiccups here or there, but for the most part, it was very, very smooth.
Yeah, and again, I would echo the same thing. Our stand-up process took about 2 weeks of implementation, and that included everybody's training. And I'd say by about the 6-month point, we had completely 100% integrated and figured out all of our shortcomings. And that's a continuous process, of course, because even to this day, we find little things that we want to tweak here and there. But I'd say 2 weeks to implement, 6 months to completely be 100%.
Implementation didn't have us that long because we didn't have that much that needed to be loaded in it because we didn't have no records to begin with, so we were basically starting from scratch.
Awesome. Well, Eric and Burke, we appreciate both of you guys for joining the webinar today. I'm sure I speak for the group in thanking you for giving some insight into your operations and your communities. Wanted to thank the attendees today for coming to the webinar. We really hope this was value add for you guys. There were a few questions that we weren't able to get to. Don't worry, we will get back to you once we wrap up the webinar today. So be expecting an email from us and follow up to those. But you can see there's different contact avenues you guys can use to get in touch with us if you have additional questions or would like to see additional webinars on some of the solutions that we offer. But again, thank you guys, and hope you have a great rest of your day.